Three girls cry and beg, but the car speeds away, leaving them alone in the middle of the road. Growing up separately, each one builds their own life without knowing that the other exists. Until, in front of the cameras, they tell their stories and make a surprising revelation. The millionaire, upon seeing this on TV, realizes that his past has come back to haunt him. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Tell us which city you're watching us from, and we'll keep going. The sun was rising over the horizon, painting the city sky in shades of orange and pink. On the rooftop of a luxurious building, Alexander watched the city awaken, holding a cup of coffee in one hand and a newspaper in the other. His eyes, tired from a sleepless night, scanned the headlines without really absorbing the news. His mind was stuck in a past he had tried to bury for 2 decades. That same morning, kilometers away in 3 different parts of the city, 3 young 25-year-old women began their days, unaware of the invisible bond that united them and the destiny that awaited them. Sophia opened the curtains in her room, letting light flood the space decorated with musical instruments and concert posters. With a smile, she picked up her guitar and began to strum a soft melody. Music had always been her companion, a gift cultivated by the family that had taken her in as a child. Meanwhile, Olivia woke up startled by the noise from the neighborhood. Sighing, she got up and went to the small kitchen of the apartment she shared with her roommates. She turned on the radio and, to the sound of a pop song, began to hum softly while making coffee. Her voice, even in a restrained tone, carried an emotion that contrasted with the coldness of her gaze. In the city center, Emma woke up on a park bench, hugging a battered guitar. With quick, habitual movements, she packed the thin blanket into her worn backpack and headed to a nearby fountain to wash her face. Her eyes, despite her fatigue, shone with fierce determination. She smoothed her disheveled hair, picked up her guitar, and walked toward the subway station, where she knew she could earn a few coins by singing to the morning commuters. Back at Alexander's apartment, the businessman placed his empty cup on the table and prepared for another day of work. His phone vibrated, displaying a notification. Voices of tomorrow benefit, tonight. Alexander hesitated for a moment before swiping his finger across the screen, erasing the notification. He didn't know it, but that simple gesture was the first in a series of events that would forever change the course of his life and the lives of the 3 young women he had abandoned so long ago. Sophia received a message from her manager, Hannah. "Don't forget to rehearse for tonight's event. This will be your big chance." The young singer smiled, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. Voces du Amanhin was one of the biggest charity events in the country, broadcast live to millions of viewers. It was the opportunity she had been working towards for years. Olivia, meanwhile, was finishing getting ready for work when she saw an ad on television for the same event. Her eyes fixed on the screen for a moment, a pang of envy and desire piercing her chest. She had always dreamed of singing on a stage like that, but the circumstances of her life seemed to conspire against that dream. With a resigned sigh, she turned off the TV and left for another day at the office where she worked as an administrative assistant. Meanwhile, Emma stood at the entrance to the subway station, tuning her guitar. She watched people rush past, some throwing coins into her open case, others simply ignoring her presence. For her, each day was a fight for survival, and music was her only ally in this constant battle. As the day wore on, the 3 women went about their daily routines, unaware of how their lives were about to intertwine. Sophia rehearsed tirelessly for her performance, repeating the notes until each one sounded perfect. Olivia, during her lunch break, would lock herself in the office bathroom to sing softly, dreaming of a different life. And Emma, with her husky, passionate voice, charmed passers-by who stopped to listen to her, even if only for a few moments. That afternoon, Alexander was chairing an important meeting at his company, discussing expansion strategies and new investments. However, his mind kept wandering, returning repeatedly to that evening's charity event. Something was troubling him, a sense that something significant was about to happen. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city streets, anticipation grew. The Anhembi Pavilion, The venue chosen for Voices of Tomorrow was buzzing with last-minute preparations. Sound technicians scurried around, adjusting equipment while producers shouted orders over the radio. Sophia arrived at the venue 2 hours before the event began, accompanied by Hannah. Her heart was beating fast as she was led to the dressing room. Looking at herself in the mirror, she tried to calm her nerves, mentally replaying every note of her performance. On the other side of the city, Olivia was leaving work, determined to stop by Nhembi just to see the action. She knew she didn't have a ticket, but something was urging her to be close to that dream, even if it was just to watch from afar. Emma, meanwhile, was counting the coins she had earned during the day. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy something to eat. As she walked through the streets, she heard people talking about the charity event. A bitter smile crossed her lips as she thought about how many meals she could buy with the cost of a single ticket to that show. As night fell over the city, the three women, separated by miles and circumstances, unknowingly shared the same thought, the burning desire that this night could somehow change their lives. Alexander, in his office, finally gave in to curiosity and decided to watch the event on television. As he turned on the set, a shiver ran down his spine, as if fate were whispering in his ear, announcing that the past he had tried so hard to forget was about to catch up with him. The clock struck 8 p.m. when the lights at the Nhembi pavilion went out, signaling the start of the show. The cameras began broadcasting live, bringing the images to millions of homes across the country. At that moment, no one could have predicted that fate was about to intertwine the lives of three sisters who had been separated for 2 decades, in a plot that would captivate the nation and change the course of their lives forever. The lights at the Nhembi pavilion flashed 3 times, signaling to the spectators that the show was about to begin. In the dressing room, Sophia took deep breaths, trying to calm the frenzy of butterflies in her stomach. Hannah, her manager, hurried in, her high heels echoing on the floor. "Sophia, darling, you look stunning!" Hannah exclaimed, adjusting a wayward curl in the young singer's hairdo. "Remember, this is your big chance. Show them what you're made of." Sophia nodded, her reflection in the mirror revealing a mix of determination and anxiety. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting her mind wander to a distant memory, a lullaby, a soft voice she could barely remember. Shaking her head to clear the hazy memory, she stood ready to face the stage. Meanwhile, outside the pavilion, Olivia watched the crowd that gathered at the entrance. Her fingers drummed restlessly against her leg, following the rhythm of a song that only she could hear. A nearby argument caught her attention. A security guard was blocking the entrance of a ragged young woman who insisted on wanting to participate in the event. "Please, I just want a chance to sing," the girl begged, her hoarse voice thick with emotion. "I've come so far." Olivia felt a pang of empathy. She moved closer to the scene, observing the girl up close for the first time. Something about her seemed strangely familiar, like an echo from a long-forgotten dream. "Hey, what's the problem here?" Olivia asked, surprising herself with her own boldness. The security guard frowned. "This girl doesn't have a ticket and is trying to force her way in." The young woman, whom Olivia now recognized as the street singer she sometimes saw on the subway, looked at her with pleading eyes. "I just want a chance. My name is Emma, and I know I can impress them if they let me sing." Olivia hesitated for a moment, then, struck by an impulse she couldn't explain, turned to the security guard. "She's with me. She's my cousin. She left her ticket at home." The security guard looked at the two suspiciously, noticing the striking resemblance between them, but eventually shrugged. "Okay, you can go in, but keep an eye on her," he warned, pointing at Emma. Meanwhile, inside the pavilion, the host took the stage, his voice reverberating through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Voices of Tomorrow. Tonight we will witness the birth of new stars and the brilliance of established talent, all for a worthy cause." The audience applauded enthusiastically, the energy in the room palpable. Backstage, Sophia waited her turn, her hands shaking slightly as she held the microphone. In his luxurious apartment, Alexander watched the live broadcast, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his eyes fixed on the screen. Something kept him glued to the program, an unsettling feeling that something important was about to happen. Back at the pavilion, Olivia and Emma found a place to stand near one of the side exits. The two exchanged curious glances, still trying to understand the impulse that had brought them together. "Thank you," Emma whispered. "I don't know why you helped me, but I appreciate it." Olivia shrugged, a hesitant smile on her lips. "I don't know how to explain it either, but something told me you needed to be here." The presenter continued. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you a young rising star, introducing Sophia." Alexander's heart skipped a beat when he heard the surname. He leaned forward, his wide eyes fixed on the screen. Sophia stepped onto the stage, the spotlight bathing her in an almost ethereal glow. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice, crystal clear and powerful, filled the hall, silencing the audience with its pure beauty. In the audience, Olivia and Emma froze. Something in Sophia's voice resonated deep within them, as if it awakened a long-dormant memory. Without realizing it, Olivia began to hum softly, her voice harmonizing perfectly with Sophia's. Emma, in turn, felt silent tears running down her cheeks, moved by an emotion she couldn't name. On stage, Sophia sang with her eyes closed, lost in the music. But as the song reached its peak, she felt something strange, as if her voice wasn't alone. Opening her eyes, she scanned the audience, her gaze inexplicably drawn to where Olivia and Emma were standing. For a brief moment, the three women stared at each other, a shock of recognition passing between them. The music faltered for a second, but Sophia quickly regained control, ending the song with a powerful crescendo that drew a deafening ovation from the audience. Backstage, Hannah was elated, knowing that this performance would mark the beginning of something big. However, she noticed the distraught expression on Sophia's face as she left the stage. "What's wrong, honey?" "You looked amazing," Hannah exclaimed. Sophia shook her head, confused. I don't know how to explain it. It was like I wasn't singing alone." Meanwhile, Olivia and Emma looked at each other, still stunned by the experience. "Did you feel that too?" Olivia asked, her voice shaking slightly. Emma nodded, unable to form words. In Alexander's apartment, the glass of whiskey had slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. He was standing there, his face pale as if he had seen a ghost. "It can't be," he muttered, the guilt and regret of 2 decades threatening to engulf him. Back at the pavilion, the host took the microphone again, announcing the next act. But for Sophia, Olivia, and Emma, the world around them seemed to have disappeared. They were caught in a moment of discovery, on the brink of a revelation that would change their lives forever. Sophia, still backstage, felt an inexplicable urge to return to the audience. Olivia and Emma, for their part, were consumed by the desire to get closer to the stage, to find the source of that voice that had touched them so deeply. Fate, which had separated them so long ago, now seemed determined to reunite them. And as the show went on, the gears of the universe turned, setting the stage for a reunion no one could have foreseen. In the dim light of his apartment, Alexander picked up the phone with trembling hands. He knew he could no longer run from the past. It was time to face the consequences of his actions, no matter the cost. As the night wore on, Voices of Tomorrow continued, oblivious to the drama unfolding backstage and in the audience. 3 voices, separated by years of silence, were about to come together again, ready to tell a story of loss, redemption, and the unbreakable power of family bonds. The hubbub of the Anhembi Pavilion seemed distant to Sophia as she walked quickly through the backstage corridors. Her heart was beating wildly, driven by a force she didn't fully understand. Hannah followed closely behind her, concern written all over her face. "Sophia, where are you going? You need to get ready for the after-show meetings," Hannah called, trying to reach the young singer. But Sophia barely listened. Her steps took her toward the audience, guided by an instinct she couldn't ignore. "I need to find them, Hannah," she murmured, more to herself than to her manager. Meanwhile, in the common area of the pavilion, Olivia and Emma moved against the flow of the crowd, their eyes frantically scanning the space for Sophia. The connection they had felt during the performance compelled them to act, even if they didn't fully understand why. "There!" Emma exclaimed, pointing to a figure emerging from the artist's restricted area. The three women finally met, face to face, and the world around them seemed to disappear. It was like looking into a mirror, each seeing reflections of herself in the other two. The silence between them was thick with unspoken questions and raw emotions. Sophia was the first to break the silence. I felt you, during the song, like we were singing together." Olivia nodded, unshed tears shining in her eyes. "I felt it too. It was like we'd known each other for a long time." Emma, normally so strong and independent, felt vulnerable at this unexpected encounter. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before either of them could respond, they were interrupted by Hannah, who had finally caught up to Sophia. "What's going on here?" she asked, looking at the three nearly identical women in confusion. The moment was broken by the growing buzz around them. People were beginning to notice the startling resemblance between the three, and soon camera flashes and excited murmurs filled the air. "Come with me," Hannah said quickly, sensing the need for privacy. She led them backstage to a private room away from prying eyes. Once alone, the three women looked at each other again, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. "My name is Sophia," Sophia began, her voice soft. "I was adopted as a child. I never knew anything about my biological family." Olivia took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm Olivia. I was adopted too, but my experience wasn't as positive as yours seems to have been." Emma hesitated for a moment before introducing herself. "Emma, just Emma. I grew up on the streets, never knew a real family." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with implications. It was Hannah who voiced what everyone was thinking. "You're triplets. There's no other explanation." The words hung in the air, a truth as obvious as it was shocking. The three women looked at each other again, this time with new understanding, seeing in each other not just physical reflections, but echoes of a shared, long-lost history. "But how?" Olivia began, unable to complete the question. "Why were we separated?" Emma concluded, her voice a mix of anger and pain. Sophia felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "I always felt like there was something missing, like a part of me was incomplete." Hannah watched the scene, her businesswoman's mind already anticipating the implications of this discovery. "This is incredible," she murmured. "Do you have any idea how much this story will captivate the public?" The three sisters barely registered Hannah's words, lost as they were in the emotion of the moment. Years of solitude, of unanswered questions, seemed to converge at this moment. "We need to find out more," Sophia said, determination in her voice, "about our parents, about why we were separated." Olivia nodded, wiping away her tears. "I've always wondered where I came from. Now it seems I've found a lot more than I bargained for." Emma, however, seemed more reserved. Years of living on the streets had taught her to be cautious. "What if the truth is worse than not knowing?" she asked quietly. The moment was interrupted by a knock on the door. A production assistant walked in, looking nervous. "Miss, there's a man outside. He says he's your father." The three sisters looked at each other, shock and apprehension evident on their faces. Hannah quickly took control of the situation. "Who is this man? How did he get here?" The assistant stammered. He identified himself as Alexander. He said he saw the performance on TV and came here immediately." Sophia felt the air leave her lungs. Alexander was a name she knew well, a powerful, influential businessman, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined a connection with him. "Do you want to see this man?" Hannah asked, looking from one sister to the other. There was a moment of hesitation before Sophia finally spoke. "Yes, I think we need to face this together." Olivia and Emma nodded in silent agreement, united for the first time in their adult lives. As the assistant left to fetch Alexander, the three sisters instinctively gathered around, forming a protective circle. They could feel the weight of the moment, knowing that their lives were about to change forever. Outside the room, Alexander waited, his body rigid with tension. 20 years of secrets and regrets weighed heavily on his shoulders. He knew the moment of truth had arrived, and there was no turning back. When the door finally opened, revealing not one but 3 identical young women, Alexander felt the world spin around him. There they were, his daughters, the children he had abandoned so long ago, now grown women, looking at him with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and yes, even a little hope. The silence in the room was deafening. No one moved for several seconds that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. It was Alexander who finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse with emotion. "My daughters, I'm so sorry." Those simple words opened the floodgates of 2 decades of pent-up emotions. Tears, questions, and accusations began to flow freely, marking the beginning of a journey of reconciliation and discovery that neither of them could have foreseen when the day began. Meanwhile, outside the Anhembi pavilion, the first rumors about the unexpected reunion were beginning to spread. The story of the separated triplets, reunited by fate on a national stage, was about to capture the imagination of the entire country. The silence that followed Alexander's words was thick, filled with pent-up emotions and unspoken questions. Sophia, Olivia, and Emma stared at the man who had just identified himself as their biological father, each processing the information in their own way. Hannah, sensing the intensity of the moment, discreetly left the room, leaving the newly reunited family alone. Before leaving, she whispered to the production assistant, "Not a word about this to the press. Understood?" Inside the room, Alexander took a hesitant step toward his daughters. His normally composed and confident face now showed clear signs of anguish and regret. "I know nothing I say can make up for the lost years, but I need you to know the truth." Sophia was the first to find her voice. "Why?" she asked simply, years of questioning condensed into that one word. Alexander sighed deeply, running a hand through his grey hair. "It was a different time. I was young, ambitious, and cowardly." He paused, searching for the right words. "When your mother found out she was pregnant with triplets, we panicked. We weren't married. My career was just beginning, and the scandal..." "Scandal?" Olivia interrupted, her voice thick with bitterness. "Is that what we were to you? A scandal?" Emma, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward, her eyes hard as steel, fixed on Alexander. "You abandoned us. You threw us away like we were nothing." Alexander hung his head, shame evident in every line of his face. "Yes, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't deeply regret that decision." Sophia, always the conciliatory one, asked softly, "And our mother, where is she?" Alexander's expression darkened even more. "Clara. She never recovered from the separation. He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "She..." "What?" Olivia pressed, dreading the answer. "She fell into a deep depression," Alexander continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 10 years ago, she decided to leave this world." The impact of this revelation was palpable. Sophia covered her mouth with her hands, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Olivia staggered slightly, as if she had been physically struck. Emma, for her part, clenched her fists, her posture rigid with pent-up anger. "Did you abandon her too?" Emma asked, her voice shaking with emotion. Alexander shook his head. "No. After we made that terrible decision, we got married. We tried to move on, but the weight of what we had done was too much to bear." The silence that followed was broken by the distant sound of applause and music. The Voices of Tomorrow event continued outside, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that small room. Sophia was the first to move. Slowly she approached Alexander, and to everyone's surprise, including herself, hugged him. "I've spent years imagining this moment," she said softly, "imagining you. And now, I don't know what to feel." Olivia and Emma watched the scene with mixed emotions. The anger was still there, but now mixed with a confusion of other feelings, sadness, curiosity, even a hint of hope. What happens now? Olivia asked, her voice betraying her uncertainty. Alexander looked at each of his daughters in turn, his eyes shining with unshed tears. That's up to you. I know I have no right to ask for anything, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to try to make up for lost time. Emma, still reluctant, took a step forward. It won't be easy. You can't just show up after 25 years and expect everything to be okay. I know, Alexander replied humbly, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. You're my daughters, and I want to know you, all of you. At that moment, a knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Hannah walked in looking worried. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a problem. Someone has leaked information to the press. There are reporters gathered outside, demanding a statement. The four people in the room looked at each other, the reality of the outside world abruptly invading their private moment. What do we do now? Sophia asked, looking from Hannah to Alexander. Alexander hesitated for a moment before speaking. I think we should be honest, tell our story, but only if the three of you agree. Olivia and Emma exchanged uncertain glances. The idea of exposing their personal story to the public was daunting, but it also offered an opportunity to control the narrative. Maybe this can help other people, Olivia said slowly. Other families who have been separated. Emma nodded reluctantly. And maybe it can help us process all of this too. Sophia looked at her newfound sisters and then at her father. Together then, do we face this as a family? The weight of that word, family, was not lost on anyone in the room. It was a promise, a challenge, and a hope all rolled into one. Alexander held out his hand, a gesture of peace and unity. After a moment of hesitation, Sophia placed her hand over his. Olivia followed, and finally, with a deep sigh, Emma completed the circle. Together, they agreed in unison. Hannah watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and professional calculation. She knew the story of the separated and reunited triplets would be a media phenomenon. But, beyond that, she saw the potential for something bigger, a platform for change, for healing. Let's do this right, Hannah said, assuming her role as crisis manager. A controlled press conference, you tell your story on your terms. As the group prepared to face the media frenzy that awaited them, each of them felt the weight of the moment. This was not just a family reunion. It was the beginning of a journey that promised to be as challenging as it was transformative. Outside, the cameras were already flashing, eager to capture the first glimpse of the newly reunited family. The world was about to learn the story of Sophia, Olivia, and Emma, triplets separated by fate and reunited by music. And so, with heavy but determined hearts, they prepared to take the first step together toward a future that was uncertain but full of possibilities. The buzz of the crowd of reporters and photographers grew louder by the second in the lobby of the Anhembi Pavilion. Flashes went off incessantly, illuminating the space like lightning in a storm. The news of the triplets' reunion had spread like wildfire, attracting the attention of all the media outlets present at the charity event. Behind the scenes, Hannah was hastily organizing an impromptu press conference. Her mind was racing, calculating the pros and cons of every word that would be spoken. Remember, she instructed the group, you control the narrative. Be honest, but don't feel pressured to share more than you're comfortable with. Sophia, Olivia, and Emma looked at each other, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. In a matter of hours, their private lives would be exposed to the entire country. Alexander, for his part, seemed to have aged years in the last few minutes, the weight of his past actions clearly visible on his face. Are you ready? Hannah asked, her hand on the doorknob that separated them from the media frenzy. The three sisters exchanged one last look, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Sophia nodded. We're ready. The doors opened, and a burst of flashes and voices engulfed them. Hannah led the way to a hastily prepared table, strategically positioning the triplets side by side, with Alexander slightly behind. Good evening, everyone, Hannah began, her voice professional and controlled. I appreciate your attendance at this last-minute press conference. We have an extraordinary announcement to make." She paused dramatically, letting the anticipation build in the room. "It is with great excitement that we present to you a story of separation, discovery, and reunion. Sophia, the talented singer you just saw on the stage of Voices of Tomorrow, has just discovered that she has twin sisters, Olivia and Emma." The room erupted in an instant. Dozens of questions were fired off simultaneously, creating a cacophony of excited voices. Hannah held up her hands for silence. "One question at a time, please. We'll start with you," she pointed to a journalist in the front row. "How were you separated and why?" the reporter asked, her microphone extended eagerly. There was a moment of hesitation before Alexander stepped forward. "This is my fault," he said, his voice shaking but firm. 25 years ago, I made a terrible decision out of fear and immaturity. I separated my daughters at birth, believing I was protecting my career and reputation." A murmur of shock ran through the room. Alexander continued, "There is no justification for my actions, only deep regret and a desire to make amends with my daughters." Another journalist raised her hand. "Sophia, Olivia, Emma, how are you feeling right now?" Sophia was the first to respond. "It's surreal," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I've spent my whole life feeling like something was missing, and now it's like a puzzle is finally coming together." Olivia nodded in agreement. "It's a mix of emotions, joy at finding my sisters, anger at the time lost, confusion about what comes next." Emma, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but full of intensity. "I grew up on the streets, fighting every day to survive, to find out that I have a family. It's something I never imagined possible." The questions continued to pour in. How did they meet again? What did they plan to do now? Were there any plans for a joint musical project? As they answered, the sisters seemed to gain confidence. Sophia spoke about her years of searching for her roots, Olivia about her struggle to find her voice in an unloving foster home, and Emma about the challenges of growing up without a support system. Alexander remained in the background, speaking only when asked directly. His face showed a mix of shame and determination, especially when he talked about his plans for the future. "I know I can't erase the past," he said at one particularly emotional moment, "but I am committed to doing everything I can to build a relationship with my daughters going forward." As the press conference progressed, it became clear that the story of the triplets had captured the public's imagination. Hashtags related to the case were trending on social media, and television stations interrupted their regular programming to broadcast the press conference live. Hannah, always on the lookout for opportunities, saw the potential in the situation. She leaned over discreetly to Sophia and whispered, "I think we should end with a performance, something spontaneous, emotional. What do you think?" Sophia hesitated for a moment, then looked at her sisters. Wordlessly, she held out her hands to them, a silent invitation. Olivia and Emma exchanged a quick glance before accepting, intertwining their fingers with Sophia's. "Excuse me," Sophia spoke into the microphone, interrupting the barrage of questions. "We'd like to share something with you." And expectant silence fell over the room. The three sisters stood up, still holding hands, and began to sing. It was not a rehearsed or planned song, but a simple, pure melody that seemed to spring directly from their hearts. Their voices mingled in perfect harmony, as if they had been singing together their entire lives. The raw emotion in their voices was palpable, touching everyone present. Tears streamed freely down the faces of not only the sisters, but also many journalists and photographers. As the last note faded, there was a moment of stunned silence before the room erupted in applause. Flashbulbs went off frantically, capturing the moment for posterity. Hannah, with tears in her eyes but a triumphant smile on her lips, knew she had witnessed the birth of something extraordinary. The triplets were not just a heartwarming story, they were a potential phenomenon. Meanwhile, Alexander watched his daughters with a mixture of pride and regret. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but in that moment, seeing his daughters united in song and emotion, he felt a spark of hope. The press conference was over, but it was only the beginning. As the triplets walked off the makeshift stage, hand in hand and with Alexander following close behind, They knew their lives would never be the same again. The world now knew their story, and the stage was set for the next act of their lives, an act that promised to be full of challenges, discoveries, and perhaps even redemption. The weeks following the press conference were a whirlwind of emotion and activity for the triplets and Alexander. The story of their unexpected reunion had captured the imagination of the Brazilian public, turning Sofia, Olivia, and Emma into instant celebrities. On a sunny Saturday morning, the three sisters gathered in Sofia's apartment. The space, once a solitary refuge, now vibrated with the energy of a newly reunited family. "I still can't believe this is all happening," Olivia said, flipping through a celebrity magazine that had a cover story about them. "It's like we're living in a dream." Emma, sitting on the floor with her back against the couch, let out a heavy sigh. "A dream for you, perhaps. For me, it still feels like at any moment I'll wake up back on the streets." Sofia walked over to Emma, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore, Bia. We're together now." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Sofia went to answer it, returning moments later accompanied by Hannah, who was carrying a thick folder under her arm. "Good morning." "Girls!" Hannah exclaimed, her infectious enthusiasm filling the room. "We have a lot to discuss today. The opportunities just keep coming." The sisters looked at each other, a mixture of excitement and apprehension on their faces. Hannah, now acting as their manager, had become a constant presence in their lives. "First," Hannah began, opening her briefcase, "we have invitations to several TV shows. Everyone wants to interview the triplets of destiny. That's what the media is calling you, by the way." Olivia laughed nervously. "That sounds like the title of a Mexican soap opera." "Well, considering our history, that's not too far from the truth," Sofia commented with a wry smile. Hannah continued, "In addition, there are proposals for a documentary, a biographical book, and," she paused dramatically, "a contract offer with a major label for a joint album." The three sisters were silent for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the opportunities that presented themselves. "It's a lot all at once," Emma said, her voice betraying a mix of excitement and fear. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this." Sofia turned to her sister. "No one is pressuring you, Bia. We'll go at your own pace." Olivia nodded in agreement. "That's right. We're a family now. We support each other." Hannah watched the sisters' interaction with interest. "Look, I understand that this is all very new and potentially overwhelming, but you have a unique opportunity here, a chance to turn your story into something positive to inspire others." Hannah's words hung in the air for a few moments before Sofia finally spoke. "What about Dad? How does he fit into all of this?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The relationship with Alexander was still a delicate area for all of them. "Alexander has been cooperative," Hannah said carefully. "He understands the importance of you telling your story on your own terms, but he also expresses a desire to be part of this process in some way." Emma snorted, crossing her arms. "He's had 25 years to be a part of our lives. Why should we let him in now?" Olivia placed a gentle hand on Emma's arm. "I understand your anger, Bia. Believe me, I feel it too. But maybe this is a chance for healing for all of us." Sofia nodded slowly. "I agree with Olivia. We can't change the past, but we can choose how we deal with the present and the future." Hannah watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and professional calculation. She could see the potential for a redemption story that would captivate the audience even more. "Look," she said, softening her tone, "we don't have to decide everything today. How about we start small? There's a talk show next week that would be perfect for you. It's intimate, it's respectful, it'll give you the chance to tell your story the way you want to." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Sofia spoke for them all. "All right, let's do this, but together as a family." Hannah smiled, satisfied. "Great, I'll confirm everything. Oh, and there's one more thing." She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I got an interesting call yesterday. A woman claiming to be your maternal grandmother is trying to get in touch. The revelation fell like a bomb in the room. The triplets were left open-mouthed, a new wave of emotions invading them. Our grandmother, Olivia whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Is she alive? Hannah nodded. Apparently so, and she really wants to meet you guys. Emma, who had been defensive until then, seemed to soften a little. More family. Who would have thought? Sophia, always the most centered, took a deep breath. Well, it looks like our journey is just beginning. What do you think? Sisters, are you ready for another twist? Olivia and Emma exchanged a look before turning to Sophia with hesitant but determined smiles. Together, Olivia said. Until the end, Emma added. And so, the triplets prepared to face another chapter. In their extraordinary story, with each new challenge and revelation, the bonds between them grew stronger, proving that the blood bond, even though dormant for years, was stronger than any adversity. As Hannah began to detail their next steps, the sisters held hands, a simple but powerful gesture that symbolized their newfound unity. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in their lives they wouldn't have to face it alone. The television studio was abuzz with activity in the minutes leading up to the taping. Makeup artists were putting on the finishing touches. Technicians were adjusting microphones and cameras, and producers were rushing around, making sure everything was perfect for the most anticipated interview of the season. Backstage, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma waited nervously. It was the first interview they would give together since the press conference that revealed their story to the world. Remember, Hannah said, adjusting Sophia's necklace, you control the narrative. If you feel uncomfortable with a question, just give me the signal and I'll intervene. Olivia took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. What if I freeze? What if I don't know what to say? Emma, surprising everyone, took Olivia's hand. We'll be here with you. You don't have to do this alone. Sophia smiled, touched by Emma's gesture. It was the first time she had seen her sister show affection so openly. Bia is right. We are a team now. The moment was interrupted by a producer who rushed in. 5 minutes to air, everyone. The triplets looked at each other, exchanging nervous smiles before heading to the set. The stage was set up with a comfortable couch for the three of them and an armchair for the interviewer, Lana Ferreira, one of the most respected journalists in the country. The lights came up, the opening music played, and Lana turned to the camera with her signature smile. Good evening. Tonight we are delighted to welcome three very special guests, three women whose stories have captured the imagination of an entire country. Welcome, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma. The cameras turned to the triplets, who smiled nervously at the audience. Thank you for having us, Lana, Sophia said, naturally assuming the role of spokesperson. Lana leaned forward, her gaze compassionate. First of all, how are you guys dealing with all this sudden attention? Olivia was the first to respond. It's surreal, to be honest. A few weeks ago, I was just an administrative assistant trying to work up the courage to sing in public. Now, well, here we are. Emma nodded. For me, it's been an even bigger shock. I've spent most of my life on the streets, invisible to society. Suddenly, I'm in every newspaper and on TV show. And you, Sophia? Lana asked. You've already had some exposure as a singer. How has it been for you? Sophia smiled softly. It's different. Before, people knew me for my music. Now they want to know about my personal story, my family. It's a different kind of vulnerability. The interview continued, with Lana expertly guiding the conversation through the events that led to the sisters' reunion. The triplets spoke about their contrasting childhoods, their dreams and struggles, and the magical moment when they finally found each other. What about your father? Lana asked, touching on the most delicate point of the story. What has the process of reconnecting with him been like? There was a moment of palpable tension before Sophia answered carefully. It's complicated. There's a lot of pain, a lot of unanswered questions, but there's also a genuine desire for healing on both sides. Olivia added, we are trying to find a balance between understanding the past and building a future together. It's not easy, but we believe it's worth trying. Emma, who had maintained a neutral expression when talking about her father, surprised everyone with her response. "I spent a lot of time being angry. Angry at him, at the pie, world at fate. But I realize now that this anger only hurt me. I'm not saying I've completely forgiven him, but I'm willing to listen, to try to understand." Lana smiled gently. "That's a very mature attitude, Emma. And speaking of family, I understand you recently found out about a maternal grandmother." The three sisters exchanged surprised glances. They didn't expect that this information had already been leaked to the media. Sophia spoke up, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, it's true. We recently received this news and are still processing it. We haven't had direct contact yet, but we are open to the possibility of meeting you. This should bring a new dimension to your journey of self-discovery," Lana commented. Olivia nodded. "Absolutely. Every new piece of information, every new family bond discovered, helps us fill in the gaps in our identities." As the interview drew to a close, Lana asked one last question. "What about the future? What are the plans for the triplets of destiny?" The sisters smiled at the nickname, exchanging knowing looks before Emma responded, surprising everyone with her initiative. "We're planning a musical project together," she revealed, a glint of anticipation in her eyes. "Something that combines our unique experiences and styles. We want to use our music to tell our story and maybe inspire others who might be going through similar situations." Sophia and Olivia beamed, proud of their sister. Lana, visibly moved, concluded the interview. "Well, I think I can speak for the entire country when I say we can't wait to hear what you have to offer. Thank you, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma, for sharing your incredible journey with us." When the cameras turned off, the triplets hugged each other, a wave of relief and accomplishment passing through them. Hannah walked over, a wide smile on her face. "You guys were amazing. I can already see tomorrow's headlines." As they left the studio surrounded by security and aides, the sisters felt closer than ever. The interview had not only introduced them to the country as a family, but had also solidified that feeling among themselves. In the car on the way home, Emma broke the silence. "So, when do we start working on this music project?" Sophia and Olivia laughed, the tension of the past few days finally dissipating. "How about tomorrow?" Sophia suggested. "We can meet in my studio at home." "Perfect," Olivia agreed. "But before that, what do you think about having dinner together tonight? Just the three of us?" The other two nodded enthusiastically. It was a small step, but a significant one. A family rebuilding itself note by note, word by word. As the car wound through the bright city streets, the triplets felt that for the first time in their lives, they were exactly where they were supposed to be. The future, with all its challenges and uncertainties, no longer seemed so daunting. After all, they had each other now. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Sophia's makeshift recording studio in her apartment. The space, once their solitary refuge, now pulsated with the energy of the three sisters gathered together. Musical instruments, sheet music, and half-empty coffee cups occupied every available surface, silent witnesses to the intense creative process unfolding. Sophia sat at the piano, softly strumming a melody, her eyes closed in concentration. Olivia, with a guitar on her lap, kept time, occasionally making notes on a worn notepad. Emma, meanwhile, paced the studio, muttering lyrics to herself, her husky voice thick with emotion. "How about something like this?" Sophia broke the silence, playing a chord sequence. "It could be the chorus." Olivia tilted her head, considering. Maybe if we speed up the tempo a bit," she demonstrated on the guitar, adding a more rhythmic beat. Emma stopped in her tracks, her eyes shining with inspiration. "Yes, that's it, and we can add lyrics here." She began to sing, her voice blending perfectly with the melody created by the sisters. For a moment, the three of them were silent, marveling at the harmony they had spontaneously created. It was as if their voices, separated for so long, had finally found their place. "Wow," Olivia whispered, a wide smile spreading across her face. "That was magical," Sophia added, looking at her sisters in admiration. Emma, usually the more reserved one, couldn't contain her excitement. "We need to record this right now." The hours flew by as the triplets worked, refining the melody, polishing the lyrics, their voices intertwining in harmonies that seemed to transcend time and space. It was more than just music. It was their story being told through notes and words. Mid-afternoon, they were interrupted by a knock on the door. Hannah came in, carrying bags of food. "I figured you might be hungry," she said, setting the bags on a table. Her gaze swept around the studio, noting the instruments and sheets of sheet music scattered about. "How's the creative process going?" Sophia smiled, exhausted but satisfied. "Better than we could have imagined. It's like our voices always knew they belonged together." Hannah nodded, a gleam of approval in her eyes. "Great, because I have news." She paused dramatically, savoring the anticipation on her sisters' faces. "The record company wants to set up a meeting. They're eager to hear what you've been producing." The news was received with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "So soon?" Olivia asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "We've barely started writing." Emma, surprising everyone, placed a comforting hand on Olivia's shoulder. "Hey, don't worry, what we have here is special. They're going to love it." Sophia watched the interaction with a smile. It was amazing to see how, in such a short time, they had developed such a natural dynamic of mutual support. "Emma's right," she agreed. "Besides, we don't need to have a whole album ready. We can show the concept, some demo." Hannah nodded, pleased with the positive attitude. "Exactly. The meeting is more to discuss directions, set expectations. Oh, and there's one more thing." She hesitated for a moment. "Alexander called. He'd like to meet with you guys before the meeting with the record label." The mood in the studio changed instantly. The sisters exchanged tense glances, the mention of their father bringing to the surface complex emotions they had momentarily forgotten during the creative process. "What does he want?" Emma asked, her voice carrying a hint of suspicion. Hannah sighed. "He didn't go into details, but he said it was important. Something about wanting to do things right this time." Sophia frowned thoughtfully. Maybe we should hear him out. We can't avoid this conversation forever." Olivia nodded slowly. "I agree. As hard as it is, it's part of our healing process, isn't it?" Emma was silent for a long moment, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Finally, she spoke. "Fine, but we do this together, the three of us." The other two nodded in agreement. Hannah watched the scene with a mixture of admiration and professional calculation. The triplets' journey continued to unfold in surprising ways, and she knew the audience was eager for each new chapter. "Great," Hannah said. "I'll set up the meeting. In the meantime, why don't you guys grab a bite to eat and then show me what you've created so far?" The sisters agreed, grateful for the break. As they helped themselves to the food Hannah had brought, the conversation naturally turned to music. They discussed arrangements, harmonies, the message they wanted to convey with their songs. "No," Olivia said between bites. "I never imagined I'd find so much joy in music again. After years of singing in secret, afraid of being judged, this is liberating." Sophia smiled gently. "Music has always been my refuge. I'm glad I can now share it with you." Emma, usually so reserved about her feelings, surprised everyone with her honesty. "For me, music was survival. It was the only thing that kept me alive on the streets, but now it's like I'm discovering its true magic for the first time." The three sisters exchanged emotional glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Despite the different circumstances of their lives, music had always been the common thread that connected them, even when they were unaware of each other's existence. Hannah watched the scene with a satisfied smile. She knew that she had on her hands not only a musical phenomenon, but a story of overcoming and reconnection that would touch the hearts of the entire country. As the afternoon wore on into the evening, the triplets returned to work with renewed vigor. The prospect of meeting with the record company and seeing their father loomed large over them, but instead of making them anxious, it seemed to propel them forward. Every note, every lyric was imbued not only with their natural talent, but with their life experiences, their pain, and now, their newfound bond. As the last notes of a new song echoed through the studio, the sisters looked at each other, mix of pride and anticipation on their faces. They knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The music they created was more than just sound. It was the soundtrack to their journey of rediscovery and healing. The restaurant chosen for the meeting with Alexander was discreet and elegant, located in an upscale neighborhood of the city. Sophia, Olivia, and Emma arrived together, their hands clasped in a silent gesture of mutual support. Hannah accompanied them, staying a few steps behind, a comforting and protective presence. Alexander was already waiting for them at a reserved table in the back of the establishment. When he saw them, he stood up, his face a mix of anxiety and hope. "Girls," he greeted, his voice shaking. "Thank you for coming." The triplets sat down, the tension palpable in the air. For a few moments no one spoke, the silence filled only by the soft hum of the restaurant. Finally, Sophia took the initiative. "You said you wanted to see us, Father. We're here. What do you have to tell us?" Alexander took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting on the table. I wanted to talk to you guys before the meeting with the record company. There are things you need to know." Olivia frowned. "What kind of things?" "About the past," Alexander replied, his voice low. "About your mother, about the circumstances of our separation." Emma, who had maintained a tense silence until then, could not contain her bitterness. "You mean the circumstances under which you abandoned us?" Alexander winced at the harsh words, but nodded. "Yes, and I deserve your anger, Emma. You all have every right to hate me, but please give me a chance to explain." The sisters exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Sophia gestured for him to continue. Alexander began his story, his voice thick with regret. He spoke of his ambitious youth, of his fear of scandal when he discovered that his girlfriend Clara was pregnant with triplets. He spoke of the pressure from his family, of their threats to disown him if he did not resolve the problem. "I was a coward," he admitted, unshed tears shining in his eyes. "I convinced Clara that it was best for everyone, that you would have better lives if you were adopted into families who could properly care for you." Olivia, who'd been listening in silence until then, couldn't contain her indignation. "And you thought separating us was the best option? Depriving us of the chance to grow together?" Alexander shook his head, shame evident on his face. "There's no justification for what we did. I was young, scared, and selfish. I only thought about myself, my career." "And our mother?" Sophia asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Why did she agree to this?" Alexander hesitated, the pain clear in his eyes. "Clara, she never fully recovered. The guilt consumed her for years. We tried to move on, we got married, but the weight of what we had done..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. The triplets already knew the tragic end of their mother. Emma, who had remained silent, her posture rigid with contained anger, finally spoke. Her voice was low but thick with emotion. "Do you have any idea what I went through on the streets? The nights of hunger, of cold, while you lived your comfortable life, building your career on the backs of our abandonment?" Emma's words hit Alexander like a physical blow. He lowered his head, unable to meet his daughter's accusing gaze. "There are no words that can express my regret, Emma. If I could take it back..." "But you can't," Olivia interrupted, her voice firm. "What's done is done. The question is, what do you intend to do now?" Alexander looked up, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I want to do things right this time. I want to support you, to be present in your lives, if you'll let me. And..." He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I want to use my resources and connections to help launch your music career." The triplets exchanged surprised glances. It wasn't what they expected to hear. "I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness," Alexander was quick to add. "I know that's something I have to earn over time if I can. But I want to give you the opportunities I've denied you in the past." Sophia was the first to break the silence that followed. I appreciate the offer, Dad, but our music, it's ours. Something we've built together, from our own experiences and pain. We don't want it to be tarnished by, well, money or outside influence. Olivia nodded in agreement. We need to do this for ourselves, prove to ourselves that we can. Emma, surprising everyone, including herself, spoke in a softer voice than before. Maybe we can find a middle ground. Your help could be useful, but on our terms. Alexander nodded vigorously. Of course. Whatever you decide, I will support it. I just want the chance to be a part of your lives. The sisters looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Sophia spoke for them all. Let's think about it. We can't promise anything right now, but we're willing to try. The relief on Alexander's face was palpable. It's more than I deserve. Thank you. As dinner progressed, the conversation slowly became less tense. Alexander listened intently as his daughters talked about their musical project, his eyes shining with a fatherly pride he had never had the chance to feel before. By the end of the night, when they said goodbye, there was a sense that something had changed. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start, a tentative step toward healing. As the triplets walked out of the restaurant arm in arm, Hannah couldn't help but notice how much stronger, more united they seemed. The reunion with Alexander, as difficult as it had been, seemed to have solidified their bond even further. So, Hannah said, as they were in the car on the way home, how are you guys feeling? There was a moment of silence before Sophia replied. Confused, hurt still, but also relieved in a way, like a weight had been lifted. Olivia nodded. It's like we can finally start closing this chapter of our lives and focus on the future. Emma, usually the most reserved, surprised everyone with her response. I always imagined that if I ever met our father, I would only feel anger. But now I don't know, there's so much to process. Hannah smiled gently. And that's why we have music, isn't it? To help process all these emotions. The triplets exchanged determined looks. Yes, they had the music, and they had each other. Whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together. As the car wound through the city's brightly lit streets, the sisters began to hum softly, their voices intertwining in perfect harmony. It was a new melody, born of the emotions of that night. A song of pain, of hope, and most of all of unity. The buzz of voices and the clink of glasses filled the record company's elegant event hall. Executives in expensive suits milled about, chatting animatedly, while sound technicians made final adjustments to the equipment. The atmosphere was one of palpable anticipation. In a far corner, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma waited nervously, their hands clasped in a silent gesture of mutual support. Hannah stood beside them, her eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail. Remember, she said softly, you are the stars here. Don't let them dictate the terms. This is your story, your music. The triplets nodded, taking a deep breath to calm their nerves. After weeks of intense preparation, the time had finally come to present their work to the record company executives. William, the label's CEO, approached with a wide smile. Ah, the famous triplets. We're all so excited to hear what you've got. Coming up. Sophia, naturally assuming the role of spokesperson, smiled back. Thank you for the opportunity, mister. We are excited to share our music with you. As the guests took their seats, the lights dimmed, focusing on the small stage set up in the center of the room. The triplets stepped up, positioning themselves in front of the microphones. There was a moment of tense silence before Sophia spoke. Good evening, everyone. The song we're going to perform is called Echoes of the Past. It's our story. With a nod to her sisters, Sophia began to play the first notes on the keyboard. The soft melody was soon joined by Olivia's crystal-clear voice, singing of loneliness and searching. Emma joined in next, her husky voice adding a layer of raw emotion to the song. As the song progressed, the three voices intertwined in complex harmonies, telling a story of separation, struggle, and finally reunion. The lyrics spoke of inexplicable, emptiness of dreams shared unconsciously, and of the overwhelming joy of mutual recognition. The chorus, sung in unison by the three, was powerful and moving. Echoes of the past, whispers of tomorrow. Three separate hearts now beat as one. Through distance, time, and pain, we found in each other the love that united us. As the song came to an end, with the triplets' voices rising to a stirring crescendo, the silence in the hall was absolute. For a moment, no one moved, as if afraid to break the spell. Then, as if awakening from a trance, the audience broke into enthusiastic applause. Many had tears in their eyes, visibly moved by the performance. William was the first to stand, applauding vigorously. "Amazing," he exclaimed, approaching the stage. "Simply incredible. Not only do you have extraordinary musical talent, but you also have a story that needs to be told." Hannah, watching the scene with a satisfied smile, knew they had won everyone over. The triplets walked off the stage, immediately surrounded by excited executives and producers eager to work with them. "We need to record a full album as soon as possible," said a renowned music producer. "The public will love this." "How about a documentary about your journey?" another executive suggested. "We could release it alongside the album." As the proposals and ideas flowed, the triplets stood together, exchanging looks of excitement and a little apprehension. It was everything they had dreamed of, but also a little overwhelming. It was at this point that Hannah intervened, her voice firm but diplomatic. "We really appreciate everyone's enthusiasm. Sophia, Olivia, and Emma are, of course, very interested in exploring all of these possibilities, but we need to discuss the details calmly, ensuring that their artistic and personal integrity is preserved in any project." The triplets gave Hannah grateful looks. She was, as always, protecting their interests. As the night wore on, the sisters were approached by a number of industry professionals, all eager to be a part of their project. Among the faces in the crowd, they spotted a familiar figure, Alexander. He stood at a respectful distance, his face a mixture of pride and hesitation. When their eyes met, he offered a shy smile and a discreet nod. Surprising herself and her sisters, it was Emma who took the first step toward him. "You came," she said, her voice neutral but not hostile. Alexander nodded. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. You guys were extraordinary." Sophia and Olivia joined them, creating a small family circle amidst the hubbub of the party. "Thank you for respecting our space," Sophia said softly. "It means a lot to us." Olivia added, "It's a start." Alexander smiled, tears shining. In his eyes, "It's more than I deserve. I'm so proud of you, my daughters." The moment was interrupted by Hannah, who approached with William. "Girls, sir, I would like to discuss some details about the contract. Can we meet in your office?" The triplets exchanged quick glances before Sophia replied, "Sure, let's go." As they followed Hannah and William out of the ballroom, the sisters felt a mix of emotions. Excitement for the future that lay before them, gratitude for the mutual support they had found, and a growing sense that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. The night that had begun with nervousness and uncertainty ended with the promise of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter that they would write and sing together. The months following their record deal were a whirlwind of activity for the triplets. The recording studio became practically their second home, with long hours dedicated to creating and perfecting their debut album. On a particularly intense afternoon, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma were in the studio, working on the track that would be the album's lead single. The air was charged with creativity, but also with a subtle tension that had been building over the past few weeks. "No, no, no," Emma interrupted the recording, frustration evident in her voice. "The arrangement isn't right yet. It's too polished. We need something rawer, more real." Olivia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "Bea, we've already redone this part 5 times. At some point, we have to make up our minds." Sophia, ever the mediator, tried to intervene. "What if we try to find a middle ground? Maybe we can keep the basic structure but add some more organic elements like Emma suggests." Before they could argue further, the studio door opened and Hannah walked in. followed by a man the triplets recognized as Michael, one of the most renowned producers in the country. "Girls," Hannah announced with a smile, "Michael came to take a look at how we're progressing. He has some ideas that I think you'll love." Michael smiled, his eyes shining with professional enthusiasm. "I heard what you guys were doing. It has potential, but I think we can take it to another level. How about we add some electronic loops in here? Maybe a more danceable beat." The sisters' reactions were immediate and varied. Sophia seemed intrigued by the suggestion. Olivia seemed hesitant, and Emma seemed furious. "Electronic loops? Dance beats?" she exploded. "That's not us. Our music is about authenticity, about telling our story. We can't just turn it into another generic pop song for the radio." The studio fell into a tense silence. Michael looked stunned by the outburst while Hannah shot Emma a warning look. "Baya," Olivia began cautiously. "Maybe we should at least consider—" "Consider what?" Emma interrupted. "Sell our souls, forget everything we've been through just to have a hit song?" Sophia, feeling the tension rising, tried to calm things down. "Look, we all want the best for our music. How about we take a break? We can discuss this later, calmly." Hannah, realizing the need to intervene, nodded. "Great idea, Sophia. Michael, why don't we come back tomorrow? I'll give the girls some time to process your suggestions." After Michael left, Hannah turned to the triplets, her expression serious. "Girls, I understand that you have a vision for your music, but you also need to understand that we are in a business. Sometimes compromises are necessary." Emma snorted, crossing her arms. "Concessions? Is that what you call completely discrediting our art?" "Bia," Olivia interjected, her voice soft but firm. "No one's talking about discrediting anything, but maybe a little openness to new ideas wouldn't be so bad." Sophia, feeling the weight of responsibility for maintaining harmony between the sisters, said, "What if we do it this way? We'll try some of Michael's suggestions, but we'll retain final creative control. If we don't like the result, we'll go back to our original vision." There was a moment of tense silence before Emma finally relented, albeit reluctantly. "Fine, but if this ends up sounding like every other generic song out there, I'll be the first to say no." Hannah nodded, pleased that they had reached an agreement. "Great. Now how about we take a break? You've been working hard. You deserve a break." As the sisters packed up their instruments and prepared to leave, it was clear that tension still lingered in the air. Their dream of creating music together was becoming more complex than they had imagined, with outside pressures and differing artistic visions threatening their newfound harmony. Outside the studio, on the sidewalk, the triplets said their goodbyes, each going their separate ways. Sophia, watching her sisters walk away, couldn't help but feel a pang of worry. They had overcome so much to find each other, to build this connection. Would the pressures of the music industry be strong enough to tear them apart again? That night in her apartment, Sophia sat at the piano, her fingers gliding gently across the keys. The melody that emerged was melancholy, reflecting her worries. As she played, she made a silent promise to herself. No matter what happened, she would do everything in her power to keep her family together. Across town, Olivia stared at the ceiling of her room, mentally replaying the day's events. She understood Emma's frustration, but she also saw the need to adapt. How could she find balance? Emma, meanwhile, walked through the bustling city streets, the energy of the city reflecting her own inner turmoil. Music had always been her anchor, her means of expression. The idea of compromising that, even in the slightest, scared her more than she cared to admit. The three sisters, physically separated but united by their thoughts and concerns, now faced a new challenge: how to maintain their artistic integrity while navigating the turbulent waters of the music industry. How to balance their individual visions with the collective dream they had built. As the night wore on, each of them knew that the decisions they made in the coming days would shape not only their musical futures, but also the bond they had worked so hard to build. The harmony they had found was being tested, and only time would tell whether their voices would continue to rise in unison or disperse into dissonant notes. The sun had barely risen when Sophia woke, startled by a dream she couldn't fully remember. Feeling restless, she picked up her phone and, after a moment's hesitation, texted her sisters, "Can we meet up? I think we need to talk." A few hours later, the triplets gathered in a small cafe, a neutral location away from the studio and the pressures of the record company. The air was thick with unresolved tension from the previous day's argument. "So," Olivia began, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "about yesterday." Emma sighed heavily. "Look, I know I snapped, but you have to understand, this song, it's everything to me. It's like finally having a voice after years of being invisible." Sophia reached out, gently touching Emma's arm. "We understand, Bea. We really do. But we also have to think about the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" Emma retorted, though her tone was more weary than combative. "Selling our soul for commercial success," Olivia interjected, her voice soft but firm. "It's not about selling our soul. It's about finding a balance between our artistic vision and the reality of the marketplace." The three of them were silent for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Sophia who finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "You know, last night I was thinking about everything we've been through to get here, about the infinitesimal chances we've had to meet, and now that we're finally together, that we have this incredible opportunity, we can't let creative differences keep us apart." Her words seemed to touch something deep within her sisters. Olivia nodded slowly, tears shining in her eyes. "You're right. We've spent so much time alone, longing for a connection we didn't even know existed. We can't lose that now." Emma, always the tough one, felt her resistance melt away. I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared of losing the one thing that's always kept me alive. My music, my voice." Sophia and Olivia immediately moved to hug Emma, forming a protective circle around her. "You won't lose your voice, Bea," Sophia assured. "We'll make sure your essence, the essence of all of us, is in every note we sing." Olivia added, "And maybe we can see the producer's suggestions not as a threat, but as an opportunity to expand our art, to reach more people with our story." Emma took a deep breath, letting her sister's words sink in. "Okay," she finally said, "I'll try to be more open, but promise me that if at any point we feel like we're losing our authenticity, we'll backtrack." "Promised," Sophia and Olivia said in unison. With new understanding and renewed determination, the triplets left the cafe and headed to the studio. When they arrived, they found Hannah and Michael waiting anxiously. "Girls," Hannah began cautiously, "how are you feeling today?" Sophia, taking on the role of spokesperson, responded, "We are ready to experiment, but on one condition: we retain final creative control." Michael nodded, a relieved smile on his face. "Absolutely. My job is to enhance what you already have, not change your essence." The next few hours were spent in intense collaboration. Michael introduced subtle electronic elements that surprisingly enhanced the raw emotion of the lyrics. Emma, although initially skeptical, found herself thrilled by the new sonic textures that complemented his husky voice. Olivia discovered that electronic loops could create complex layers that echoed the depth of her vocal harmonies. And Sophia, ever the balancer, found ways to fuse traditional elements with modern ones, creating a unique sound that was both familiar and innovative. At the end of the day, when they played back the new version of the song, there was a moment of stunned silence in the studio. The song had transformed into something beyond what any of them could have imagined individually. "Wow," Emma whispered, tears in her eyes. It's even more us than it was before." Hannah, watching from afar, couldn't help but smile with pride. She knew she had witnessed not only the birth of a potential hit, but a pivotal moment in the triplets' growth as artists and as a family. As the sun set over the city, casting a golden glow through the studio windows, the sisters embraced, their voices rising in impromptu harmony. It was more than just music. It was a celebration of their bond, their journey, and the promise of a bright future together. That night, as they left the studio, exhausted but exultant, each of the triplets carried with them a renewed certainty. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Their music, like their family bond, was strong enough to weather the storms of life and the industry. And so, with light hearts and renewed hope, Sophia, Olivia, and Emma walked, hand in hand through the bustling city streets, ready to write and sing the next chapter of their extraordinary journey.